Welcome. This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and brought to you by our title sponsor, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Don't trust some 1-800 number. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. If you are 50 plus and are facing or you're considering divorce, we're here to provide education and information from experts to help you in your divorce journey. I'm your host, Lisa, and now let's podcast. Well, today I am so pleased to be joined by Phil Weiss. He is the founder of Apprise Wealth Management. He's a frequent contributor to Money Tree Investing Podcast, which I listen to regularly and try to understand all of the terms and terminology and plans that they're talking about. Phil is a CFA charter holder, CPA, and registered life planner. His firm, though, is dedicated to helping women facing life transitions. So welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, wonderful. So I understand that you are in Phoenix, Maryland.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I like to tell people that I'm from the other Phoenix, the one nobody's heard of.
Right.
My kids tell me that mine was here first.
I know when I saw Phoenix, I thought he was in Maryland. It threw me off. So are you guys experiencing beautiful fall colors there in Maryland?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so are we. I was thinking this morning, this is I don't want to get out of my hot shower time of year. It's chilly. I don't want to get out of the hot shower, but I haven't turned the heat on at my house. So, yeah, wonderful. Well, I am so glad you're here. And, you know, when I read about you, I thought it was so unusual to have a wealth management firm solely focused on the needs of women. And I've heard that you have a very compelling story that led you in that direction. So can you tell me a little bit about what brought you to your plan of helping women as they're going through many different transitions in their lives?
Sure. Growing up in my house, it was pretty much the traditional model. My father was responsible for the finances. My mom was responsible for taking care of my sister and me. But the thing is, when it came to finances, my father wasn't good at it. We had unpaid bills. We had no credit. When I got my driver's license, I remember having to go down to the phone company, the cable company, the electric company to pay the bills so that we didn't, so our service could be turned back on.
Oh my gosh.
When it was time for me to go to college, I was told to go anywhere you want. So I decided I was going to school. I was going to be a doctor, and I chose to go to Duke because I thought that would give me the best chance of doing that. I was a psychology major. I did a lot to stay in school, but after my junior year, the school and I agreed that I had to pay, come up with the money to pay the balance that was outstanding before I could finish. I was only 6 courses from graduating. So I left school, and I ended up moving across the country and living in Tucson. And when I was ready to go back to school, I no longer was pursuing a medical career, and I decided I was going to be an accountant because I've always been good with math. I applied to University of Arizona. I applied to Rutgers because I'm originally from New Jersey, and I had residency in both places, and I decided to come back and finish at Rutgers. When I came back and did that and got my accounting degree, my mom went back to school, and she became an occupational therapist. I know without her telling me that the reason that she did that was because she was trying to get herself so that she could be on strong enough footing that she could be on her own. After I finished school, I moved back home. One day I got the mail, and I found these credit card bills that had my name on them. There's only one problem. they weren't my accounts. My father had forged my name to open up credit card accounts because he couldn't get credit. And I knew this for a fact because one of the banks actually sent me a copy of the application, and it was clearly his signature. I confronted him about it. He admitted it. And I eventually got the cards out of my name. They went into his because at least he'd been paying on them, so they didn't really question his credit at that point. A little while later, I had moved out of my house and was on my own, and my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. He asked me to help, and because that's when we figured out how bad the financial situation in my house really was. We had unpaid bills, like those credit cards that I mentioned.
Right.
My father stopped paying on them, so they were all in collection. My parents were in danger of being foreclosed on their house, which had a well above market interest rate as it was. But I did what I could, but unfortunately, my mom didn't make it. Her breast cancer metastasized to her brain. She passed away about 18 months after her diagnosis. So I look at the work that I do now as trying to help other women avoid the kind of things that my mother went through.
And you really had a trial by fire. You managed just about every financial disaster that can happen in one family at one time. And as I was reading about you, I thought, having that psychology major background and dealing with finances, it really provides a unique perspective in how people think about money. I thought it was a great combination to have a psychology background and a finance background. So, but working with women, it was an evolution in your career, right? Did you start out with your degree that you wanted to work with women, or was that something that you came into as a result of the different clients that you worked with?
It was more the latter. And just to give you a little bit more background on my career, so as you said up front, I'm a CPA. So I worked for Deloitte, and I was a tax guy. I ended up specializing in international corporate tax planning, and ultimately decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And during the end of my time as a tax person, I found the Motley Fool, and I used to help manage one of their portfolios, that they had an online portfolio, and I learned about the CFA and decided that was my ticket out of the tax department. So I went and got my CFA and left the tax world. In between, I worked for T. Rowe Price as a writer and editor, which is how I ended up in the Baltimore area.
Okay.
And ultimately, I left that job because I got a job as an analyst after I got my CFA, and I covered oil and gas stocks for 7 years. And then I left there, and I went to work for another financial advisor, but it really wasn't the right fit. And I tell people I got tired of working for idiots, so I decided to be the idiot and start my own firm. I initially thought that my niche was going to be healthcare professionals, because when I was working as a tax person, I had a lot of knowledge and experience in that field because it's a lot of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't really happen. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, Phil, you should work with more women. And I looked at it. Well, before I looked, I said, I think that's like a third of my client base. Well, when I really looked at it, it was almost 2/3. So it just kind of happened. And as I thought about my story, it made a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And, it's just a way to honor and respect my mom by by working with, like I said, trying to help other women avoid the kind of things that she went through.
Yeah. And since I started this podcast and hearing the stories of women who are divorcing, it happens over and over again where they are unaware of what the husband has been doing with the finances behind the scenes. And very similar, they discover credit cards that are maxed out that they knew nothing about, or loans that they knew nothing about that the husband took out in their name. So it's a very traumatic time for them to try and determine how do they move forward. So,
yeah, yes, it is.
It is. It's really refreshing to see that there is somebody who's just focused on those needs of women. So I understand, though, your name, though, when you started your firm, is very intentional as well. What was the genesis of the name Apprise?
It was interesting to me when it was time to name my firm. I went through all kinds of names. And you have to think about, is there a website? And does anybody else have a name close to it? But ultimately, the word apprise means to inform.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like to work with clients to educate and inform them and help so that they better understand. It's not like I'm just going to say, here's what you do and never explain it. I'm happy to explain it. So education is really important to me. And I thought that the name Apprise, because it means to inform, fit that so well. So it was a very intentional choice, and I really liked it because of that.
It really goes along with your life planning, and I want to get into that. And a little bit later, I want to talk about the scholarship fund that you created for women. But I wanted to jump into your approach to helping women with life planning. And as I mentioned, we help women or people who are over the age of 50 and who've been in long-term marriages. Sometimes they've been in a marriage for 20 or 30 years, and sometimes they're in the process of considering divorce. They don't really know if they want to step forward, or they're actually facing it. And what we often see are boomers. They have not been involved in the family finances, and they have no idea what is there. And I can just relate my story. My father was very traditional. He was a watchmaker, but he was a devoted fan of William Buffett and Dave Ramsey, and he invested in the stock market and farmland. And he shared his financial knowledge with my brother, but he never shared any financial knowledge with me. The extent of the financial knowledge he shared with me was, he would say, it's just as easy to marry a rich man as it is a poor man. And the other thing he would say is never wait for somebody to give you anything. You have to work for it yourself. So it was just interesting that he shared so much knowledge with my brother, but for the woman and his daughter, he felt that eventually her husband would take care of her. So everything I learned about finance, I learned on my own. So, I'm curious, you've worked with a lot of people. From your perspective, what does keep women from being involved in the family finances today?
A lot of it, I think, is kind of, we have that traditional model, right? And that was how it often was that the husband was responsible for the finances and through division of responsibility, because there's a lot of things to do when you have a family, and the wife or the mother was the caregiver, and so that was their primary responsibility. I will say it's really interesting. As part of my process that goes beyond the life planning, I have these values cards and these other cards that I can give to people, and I ask them about what were finances like in your house growing up. Mm-hmm. And it's often that it was a very hierarchical type thing where one person was responsible. And like I said, at least in the past, and I think it's changing now, it was often the male. And when I ask people, the follow-up part of that is, what is it like in your house now, or what would you like it to be? And you get many more answers about they want it to be a joint process where there's conversation, discussion. Money itself is a hard topic for people to talk about. In general, I think people find it easier to talk about sex than they do money. So yeah. We was siloed with this one person, and there were never any conversations about it.
In retirement, oftentimes money is the one subject that causes people to decide to divorce. There's huge differences in how to spend money in retirement. One person might be thinking, we have to be careful, we cannot live our money. And the other person is thinking, well, we saved for this, it's time to enjoy it and spend it. And you do see that it is one of the top causes of divorce among gray divorce. So it is something that it seems to touch all generations. But how can we begin to change that dynamic? If I am my daughters, for example, as they're getting married, how can they begin to change that dynamic so they do have more involvement in the family finances and are more aware of what's happening?
I think there's a couple of things that I think of, and the first is education. financial literacy, like, as I said, I name my firm because I believe in education and having people be informed. And it just has to be a greater willingness to talk about finances and don't leave it as this big, scary subject that you're afraid to broach. Have those conversations. I think it makes a big difference if you can talk about it. It's interesting. When I first started the transition my business to where it was focusing on working with women, I used to think too that in that traditional model, the family would be saving. And then as they got to that point, kind of like you were talking about, when retirement is approaching, and now the wife would ask the husband, so I know we've been saving, but how much do we have? What is it going to allow us to do? And what are we going to be able to do? And he just kind of looks at her and says, I don't know. I've just been saving, because even the rules change when we go from accumulating or saving for retirement to decumulating or spending in retirement. The tax rules and everything else are very, very different. And a lot of times that's why even couples will seek help, because they don't know the answer to that question about what it all means. And so it's really helpful. That's where having an advisor can help you too, because it's somebody that you can work with, that can explain to you, that can help you understand and help you get to do those things that you want to do. I mean, with life planning, I like to think about, we want to align our spending with our values and not always suffer from, the guy across the street they have a nicer car than me, or my friend has a nicer house, or whatever. It's got to be what's right for you and what you can afford. And what you don't know when you see that is what the real financial position is. How much debt do they have? What's their financial life really like? You don't know. So it's getting caught up in that can be dangerous. So it's best to understand what really matters for you and put things to work in a way that works for you.
Yeah, and let's talk about that difference in life planning. I found your holistic approach very intriguing. It isn't just crunching the numbers for how to spend the money or how to save the money, but you really take an approach that looks at the entire person's life, their goals, and you incorporate that. So can you tell me, what is a registered life planner? How is it different from a traditional financial planner?
Sure. So to become a registered life planner, it's not like I just said, hey, I'm going to be a registered life planner. It's a whole process. I went through 2-day training. I went through 5-day training, and then a 6-month mentorship in order to be able to become a registered life planner. And when I work with people, I like to start with the life planning before I get to the numbers. If there's an important issue financially that you have to address, obviously we're going to address that. But beyond that, I think starting with the life plan really helps. And I said we were going to align our money with our values before, but I'll take it a step further. And I'm going to use an acronym, which is TEAM. And I like to say that we have a team of capital. And by that, I mean we have time, energy, attention, and money. And we want to align all those things with our values. And we want to help you spend your capital in more meaningful ways. And so that's really the crux of it. And so when you work with a registered life planner as opposed to a regular financial advisor, you're going to get some really deep questions, like what I use, the questions that I use to help create a vision. And I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into the process, but there's 3 questions that really drive the process. And those 3 questions, the first one is that imagine that money was no object. You just won the lottery and you were set. What would you do and how would you live your life? And in that question, you can really dream big. Then the second question, we start to get a little bit more serious. This time, money does matter. And you go to the doctor and you get the unfortunate news that you have 5 to 10 years left to live. The good news is you're not ever going to feel sick. The bad news is you don't know when you're going to go. So now it's, what would you do? What would you change? And how would you live your life? So you start to think about like those things that are important. And then the third question is really the hardest one of all. This time you go to the doctor and you get the unfortunate news that today's the day. And the question there isn't what would you do, although some people answer it that way. The question is, what did you not get to do, and who did you not get to be? And the reasoning behind this is we want to try to identify those things that we could do now so that we don't get to the end of life with regret. So it's about avoiding regret. What can we do now so we get to the end of life not saying, I should have done this or I could have done that or any of that. We've already done those things. We live a much more fulfilled life that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking as you talked about that, helping people decide how to spend their money, that would include helping me decide if I want to give away my money, if I want to donate some money, what legacy do I want to live, and even helping from a standpoint of how do I help my children and at what time frame do I help my children financially? Are those some of the considerations that go into that life plan?
Absolutely, because the life planning training is experiential. And so for me, one of the things that came out is just kind of like what you talked about, and you touched on it before, is that I would like to have a scholarship that goes to women who go back to school later in life, like my mother did. Mm-hmm. That was something that when my mother passed, I remember I had asked people, instead of making, if you want to make a donation, instead of donating to some type of cancer research, could you make a donation? She was part of a professional organization, and I asked if they could make a donation to that because I wanted to do a scholarship. But of course, that process didn't really go very well, and I wasn't as involved, and I wasn't in any position to fund anything. And I kind of forgot all about it. And then as I went through my life planning training, I remembered all that, and so that kind of all came back to the surface. And so that's why I wanted it. That was the motivation for wanting to do it now. It's something I thought about a long time ago, but I hadn't done anything with, and I was reminded of it as I went through the process and said, that's really something I want to do.
That would really benefit a lot of women who are divorcing at 50 and 55, and they were stay-at-home moms, and they know they need to go back to school in order to support themselves. And it is hard because I went back. I was 40 when I went for my bachelor's, and older when I went for my master's, and it was all pretty much student loans and out of pocket. So having a resource for a scholarship would just help so many women. That's tremendous. I applaud you for that. So
thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm very impressed with that.
Tired of living with pain? Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Surgery offers cutting-edge tools and advanced technologies to get you back to the life you love, faster. With us, you can recover at home after surgery in hours, not days. Our highly experienced team of physicians deliver the exceptional and personalized care you deserve. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Surgery. We're the center for pain today, gone tomorrow. Learn more at sportmed.com.
Let's talk then about, you call your plan E.V.O.K.E. and a financial life planning process. So what are, you talked about some of the steps, asking them, how they would spend their money if they knew they were about to pass away or if they were sick. What, if I'm going to embark on this with you, what are some of the things that I should have prepared or I should be thinking about as I would come in to see you?
Honestly, you don't have to necessarily prepare for that first meeting because the life planning process has an acronym called E.V.O.K.E. And so the first meeting is an exploration meeting. And in that meeting, I'm really going to ask you, why are you here? What is it that made you decide that you wanted to talk to somebody like me in the first place? Let's talk about things like, what would your most fulfilled life be? You really want to think and dream big. And then after that, then we get into the next stage, which is vision. And during the vision, we go over those three questions that I mentioned. And then I take them, and from them, I create a vision of, for a period from today that would go out no more than 2 years, about those things that are important and show you on that path. And the idea is when we start to see this vision of where we can go, it motivates us to move in that direction. It makes it easier for us to accomplish things. And a lot of times these things are nebulous, and if we don't put time frames and guidelines around them, it gets really hard to accomplish. And then in the next meeting, it's the O, which is obstacles. What can get in the way? And you have to understand that during these meetings, it's not me telling you what to do. It's me asking you questions and giving you prompts to help you figure it out, because it's your life. It's your plan. It's not mine. So I don't want to feed you answers. So a lot of my meetings are virtual, and I have a tool that tells me when I'm on a virtual call how long I talked. And I never talked for more than 20% of those of the E.V.O.K.E meetings. Sometimes it's as low as 10%, and that's counting me asking you questions, because it's really a chance for you to think about what you want and what's important to you. And then we take that from there. Then we get to the knowledge parts. That's like where my knowledge as a financial advisor comes into play, so we can then create the financial plan that incorporates these things that are important to you. And then we want to go out and execute on the plan and have you live your most desired life.
So it really sounds like it's a self-discovery process. Somewhat of a soul-searching self-discovery and financial planning wrapped into one.
There's definitely a lot. Like I said, I mean, when I went through it, there were things that I remember that I hadn't thought of for a long time, but it just makes you think. And so many times we're in a conversation and we don't really get a chance to really think through and really dig into what our motivations are and what matters to us. We just don't ever have a chance to think about that. So on a conversation, it's okay for there to be silence too, because it just means you're thinking.
Yeah, and so often when you go into a meeting about money, it is what percent do you want in bonds and how much risk do you want to take, and it's all about money moves, but not necessarily about looking as holistically as you do. It's pretty remarkable. So if I think I want to go through this process, about how much time does it take from start to end before you have a financial life plan?
So from the E.V.O.K.E meeting that I talked about, exploration, vision, and obstacles, that's a minimum of 3 meetings, one for each. They take an hour, usually take an hour to an hour and a half each. But there's also, you have some homework too. Right? Like I give you the 3 questions in advance. There's some other exercises that I give you to complete. So it's going to take you a little bit more time than that, just like it's going to take me a little bit more time too, right? Because I'm going to go through things. That's the life plan part. I've had some clients that, like I said, there's other exercises beyond the one that I mentioned. I have some clients that wanted to go through every single exercise. And so for them, it was more than the 3 meetings or even more than 6, because it was, in this one case, it was a couple, and they wanted to go through each one of the schedules. And sometimes it would take 2 hours per meeting. I would say that for them, it was probably 6 to 8 meetings, and they were all 1.5 to 2 hours each. So, and I don't limit it. Whatever you need is what's right. And those meetings should generally be about no more than 2 weeks apart. I mean, sometimes life gets in the way and we have to put more time in between, but in general, the meetings are 2 weeks apart.
So it sounds like a really thoughtful process. And if you think about your lifespan, what you're planning for, that's really appropriate to put that amount of time and effort into a plan that you'll feel comfortable with and that you can live by as you go forward in your career or even in retirement. So it's just so wonderfully rounded as a program. I'm really impressed by that. So let's talk about what if I'm not wealthy? Is this something that is only for the wealthy, or if I am, I'm a middle of the road person, and I can tell you that it wasn't till later in my career where I felt like, I could see a financial planner. Many people have the concept that financial planning is only for the wealthy. Could you talk about that?
Sure. To me, a financial life plan, especially, isn't just about managing your assets. It's about aligning your financial decisions with your personal values, your goals, and life's transitions. And it's important to everyone because it can give you clarity and direction in terms of setting achievable goals. It can give you peace of mind, which means reduced stress. And I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't want to see their stress levels reduced.
Right. Yeah.
Adaptability is important because life changes can occur without notice. So when you do this, you can hopefully have a financial safety net and be better positioned to adapt without any major setbacks along the way. It gives you more control over your future because you can be proactive in how you manage things rather than reactive. It helps you to prioritize values, so you're focusing on what truly matters to you. In summary, I don't think of wealth as a prerequisite to financial planning. It's about helping you to make intentional, informed decisions to support the life you want to live, regardless of your current financial situation.
And again, as women are coming out of the divorce process, it seems vital that they have that level of support. I think it would help them feel more confident moving forward with their lives. So let's talk about then those women who are just, they're starting the divorce process. The money aspect and the change, it can be so overwhelming. Would this help them to wrap their arms around what their financial situation is and give them more confidence as they're going into the process? Or would you recommend that this happen after a divorce and after women are more secure in what they're going to have after it's over?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of times it depends on the person and how clear you are on what you want. When we go through life planning, I remember during training at one point we were told, and I know this is true, that it's not about, my job isn't to say no to anything, right? My job is to help you figure out how to do those things that really matter. And it means that sometimes it means you give something else up, right? Like you hear the story about people say, don't go get that $15 latte.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
right.
if that $15 latte means, yeah. And if that $15 latte means a lot to you, then you can get it. But it just means that there might be something else that you can't do.
It's a trade-off.
So it's about trade-offs.
Yeah. And I will have to say, in preparing for mine, we are mandatory mediation for conflict divorces here in Tennessee. It was hard to go through that process of trying to decide what do I really want so that it can help me live my life and achieve the goals that I still have in my life. I didn't want the divorce to be the end of my dreams or goals that I had. So having someone help me think through that would have been very clarifying. So it is something that I probably would have reached out during the process to help get some clarity around the life planning part of it. It's almost like therapy and finances in one. That must speak to your psychology background, right? Helping people think through. But then I'm kind of a finance nerd too. So, but I wanted to also ask you, when you're in the planning process with somebody, does it also take into consideration tax strategies and estate planning? Is that kind of part of it as well?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, I started out as a tax person. And to me, taxes and investing or your finances are joined at the hip. Mm-hmm. You need to take taxes into account when you're making decisions. So this is where my experience as a CPA really comes into play. And I do work with people on different tax planning strategies because after our home Taxes are one of, if not the biggest expense that we have. They're huge. And it's not about a tax avoidance. It's about paying your fair share and not paying more. And I like to think of taxes as, I don't worry so much about what you pay in a given year. The goal is to reduce your lifetime tax bill. And for example, I have clients that I work with all the time that the current tax law that we have, at the end of 2025, it sunsets. And we don't know what's going to happen after that. I can make guesses, but they're only guesses, right? When I worked for Deloitte, I remember that we'd have every year there'd be proposed tax legislation. And the big think tank guys in the firm would come through and say, okay, here's what it means if this happens, and all these things happen. But half of it would never pass.
Right.
So I don't try to speculate on where we're going. If we look at the country's fiscal position, it seems like rates are going to go up. It seems unlikely they'll go down. Maybe they will. But in a historical context, today's rates are low. So I have clients that I work with, I look and see what is, and I like to think of it in terms of marginal rate, which is the rate of tax you pay on your last dollar of income. What's your marginal rate today? And if we look at your plan and see what things look like in the future, what might your rate be in the future based upon what we know today? And if we can, the tax brackets right now go 10, 12, 22, 24, then they go 32, 35, and 37. So if I have somebody that has room in the 12% bracket or the 10% bracket, I might fill them up to 12. And we can do things like Roth conversions where we take IRA money and we convert it to a Roth so we pay tax today and not have to worry about it in the future. If they're in the 22 or 24% bracket, I might have them fill up up to the 24% bracket as much as they can because they're going to have to pay taxes. But if we look at things, remember that when you get to be 65, if you're on Medicare, your premiums are also impacted by your income. So if we can do things to reduce future Medicare charges, that's helpful. I mean, I have clients in their 70s that we're still doing Roth conversions just because if I look at what their tax picture looks like, it makes sense for them to fill up a certain bracket now. So tax is the really important part of what I do.
Oh, yeah. And I understand there's big changes coming on the inheritance taxes and levels, if you will, as to apparently people are worried about that changing soon in 2025. So that could impact.
That's correct.
That could impact your financial plans and what you're planning to do. If you should spend your money now or continue to hang on to it and plan to pass it on to your kids after your death, right?
That's right. I mean, I even wrote a blog called How Roth Conversions Can Benefit You, Your Surviving Spouse, because remember if your spouse passes away, at some point you're going to file single, and that's going to have an impact, and you're going to lose Social Security income, but there might not be a lot of the items of income that you're going to lose. Your tax rate's likely to go up, and your heirs, because I mentioned, like, I have one client that's in the 10% tax bracket and wants to leave money to kids. Mm-hmm. And so we fill up the 12% bracket because that 12% is less than the kids are going to take. And they're only going to have 10 years to take the money out. And if it's a regular inherited IRA, they're going to pay tax on it. At least if we put it in a Roth, we've already paid the tax. They can let it sit there for 10 years if they have the financial wherewithal to do that. And so we want to think about that. And on the estate side, honestly, paying some tax now to do a Roth conversion pulls money out of the estate too. So if you're worried about the thresholds, then it could make sense to do Roth conversions from that perspective. I mean, I have a client that we convert $25,000 a month to Roth because there's a lot of IRA money, and it also is going to impact the value of the estate and pull it down. So hopefully they get underneath, help them get under those thresholds because there'll be less to give away if we pay some of the tax now, and then the kids will get the money in a Roth where they won't have to pay tax on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's smart. That is something that you don't often think about. You're just focused on putting that money away and putting that money away. But at some point, you do need to stop and say, well, what is going to happen when I pass on, and what's going to be left? And as I mentioned, my father and mother, they purchased farmland. So what we're seeing in Illinois are oftentimes a parcel of farmland has to get sold to pay the taxes because of, as they pass that threshold, and there was no one looking at it from all of the assets and what needed to happen to reduce that tax liability as that person got older. So a lot to think about.
Yes, there is. And, estate taxes are even more burdensome than regular taxes, too. So if we can do things to help reduce those, that's also a big plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's important. So I wanted to just touch for a minute. I read that you're a proponent of 5 keystone habits for a better return on your life. And I thought maybe if you could just share with us what those 5 keystone habits are.
Sure. So I talk about them in an ebook that I put out about how to flourish through life's changes. So to me, it starts with life planning. I think that's so important because it just can add so much more meaning and purpose. And I just got back from kind of like refresher training last week, where I was with other life planners and we practiced with each other on our life plans. But I just know that if I look at my life, having a life plan has improved my quality of life because of the fact that I now am trying to do things with more intention and do those things that really matter. The next part of that is building a solid foundation, and that means having an emergency fund. If you have debts, you want to have a plan to repay them. You want to have a budget. You want to start saving. Yesterday is really the best time to start saving. You want to get strategic about taxes, and you want to protect yourself, your assets, and your loved ones. That means having the right insurances. You want to make sure that you plan for longevity. So there's 2 things that we can do. I talk to clients all the time about maximizing Social Security benefits. If it makes sense, you can work longer. And you want to also think about long-term care, especially in that situation where, if you've gone through a divorce and now you're on your own and you may not have anybody to help with your care. So you want to make sure that you properly thought about that. You want to make sure that you're investing in your future. And when I think about investing in general, I think about being a long-term rather than a short-term investor. I'm not a big trader. I'm not going to do that kind of thing. You want to have a diversified portfolio. You want to consider charitable giving and how it fits into your strategy. If you have a high-deductible health plan and you can utilize an HSA, health savings account, that can be really beneficial because a health savings account is more tax efficient than any other retirement savings vehicle if you use it in the right way. And as I talked about, considering Roth conversions can also help to reduce that lifetime tax bill. And then the last part is you want to create an estate plan for your heirs and yourself. If you need it, you want to have a will or trust. You want to make sure that you've properly titled your assets and have beneficiary designations on all your financial accounts, because if I put beneficiary designations on the accounts, that keeps things out of probate, and probate can add cost. So if we have beneficiary designations, then the accounts can just pass by that. You want to have powers of attorney primarily for finances and healthcare, and you want to make sure that you have a living will.
All right, I've covered most of those. I can see I have some big gaps that you've talked about I need to start thinking about as well. So that's really good advice. And if I am new to family finance planning, maybe I haven't been involved at all, and is there some resources you can recommend? I know your website has some wonderful blogs on it, but any tips that you would give us as to a starting point? If I want to become a little bit more financially literate, where can I start?
So as you mentioned, I do have, you can go to my website. I blog every week, and there's a search tool on my blog if you're looking for a specific subject. I mentioned that I have a ebook or guide. It's called How to Flourish Through Life's Big Changes, 5 Steps for Women Facing New Beginnings. And you can go to my website and just add /ebook to the end of the web address, and you can download that. I also am developing a scorecard that can be used to see where you stand in the life planning process with your own life plan before you talk to anybody. And then if you're just looking for a book that would really help, I recommend Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. It's a really wonderful book. It's got a very good long-term philosophy, and Morgan tells a lot of stories, and stories are always helpful in making it easier to understand things.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about yet today?
So my blog that actually came out today as we're speaking is called A Man Is Not a Plan. So, we talked before about this traditional family model. And there's times when I talk to people, like I had somebody recently that a friend of mine wanted to refer a relative of his. And she was all set to talk to me, and then she met a new guy. And now she wasn't as interested. But then you can fall into the exact same traps that you were in before. So take ownership of your finances. Even if you're with somebody or not, make sure that you understand what your finances are. It's important that you know. And so don't just say that having somebody else do it for you is a plan. Even if you work with an advisor, make sure that it's a relation, somebody that you're comfortable with working with and that can explain things to you. I always think that the only dumb question is the question we didn't ask, because if we never ask, we're not going to know the answer.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. If you don't have knowledge, you're afraid to ask because you don't want to appear dumb. So you have to ask, even, and a lot of advisors take great delight, like you, in educating people. So they actually enjoy getting those questions that you may think are dumb questions, but there is no dumb question. And I love the title of your blog, A Man Is Not a Plan. It made me chuckle as I thought about my dad's advice that it was just as easy to marry a rich man as a poor man. So yeah. I think, I look forward to going to read that one. Well, Phil, thank you. Thank you for joining me today and sharing your expertise. I know you mentioned your website. If you could give us that address, and then your social media, how we can reach you and follow you on social media.
Sure, I'd be happy to. But I just want to add one other thing. Sure. As you made that comment about your dad again. And I was thinking there's a podcast that I like to listen to called 50 Fires. And the person that hosted, his name is Carl Richards. And he started as a financial advisor, and he's trying to have money conversations with people. So the name is 50 Fires. You want to have 50 great conversations around a campfire with people about money. Huh. And on one of the episodes, he had his wife on. And his wife told a story that was similar to yours, which he had never heard till she was on the podcast with him. That basically she was going to school to find a man.
Right.
not to have a career, but just to find a man.
Yeah, I remember in those days we called it MRS University.
Yeah.
You were going for your MRS degree.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. And now I tell my daughters, make sure you always have your own accounts. And you can have a household account, but make sure you always have your own money. So, and what's being spent. So, very important. Well, and again, your website was is it apprisewealth.com? If you'd share that with us.
Yes, it's Apprise Wealth, and that's APPRISE wealth.com. If you go to my website, you can schedule a call. You can send me an email. You can sign up for my blog. I primarily, from a social media perspective, I'm primarily posted on Facebook and LinkedIn, but I'm starting to use Instagram a little bit more. Okay. And there is, on LinkedIn, I do have a company page, but LinkedIn, it's better to look up an individual than it is a company, and that's common for most. On Facebook, I have a company page, and there's no charge to talk to me at all. We want to make sure that I'm the right advisor for you and you're the right client for me. I want you to be comfortable with the choice that you make.
And you do Zoom consultations. You don't have to be in Maryland. You don't have to be in Maryland to work with you, right?
That's correct. I have clients in about 18 states.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking about finance. I appreciate it. And please join us on our next episode and make sure you subscribe to the Silver Divorce Podcast. I welcome your feedback. You may email me at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com or join my Facebook and Instagram pages at Silver Divorce Podcast. Also, please take a moment to leave us a rating and a review. Those are so important to grow the podcast and also attract great guests like Phil. And this podcast is brought to you by our title sponsor, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Don't trust some 1-800 number. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or you are newly in that divorce process, we'll help you navigate and we'll tell you things your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce is one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.